Hello and welcome to A Path to Cyber Resilience. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know again there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, and I'd especially like to call your attention to a link to get started with Rubrik. I was poking around that link earlier. It includes a link to watch the Rubrik Data Security Summit on demand. There's a Gartner Magic Quadrant report. There's an ebook. There's a white paper. So many resources. So check that out for more information. You can also find some links to Actual Tech Media resources like the Gorilla Guide Book Club and the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. So again, I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert panelists today. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. So after the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. So with all that out of the way, let's get to today's fantastic content. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today from Rubrik. We have Ankit Agarwal, who's Principal Product Manager, and we have Alex Restrepo, who's a Senior Sales Engineer. So Ankit and Alex, welcome.
Hi, happy to be here.
Thanks, Scott.
Happy to be here. Well, it's great to have you guys here. We're excited to hear the insights and demos you're going to share about cyber resilience. So Ankit, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. And thanks a lot, folks, for joining this conversation. We're really excited that you are here, and we have some fantastic content to share today. So a little bit about me. I'm a principal product manager here, and I work on a product called Rubrik Security Cloud. This is our SaaS offering for really providing a single pane of glass for everything you do, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it today. But before we talk about Rubrik, let's actually talk about what we are seeing, what challenges the businesses are facing today, right? So ransomware attacks, these are on mainstream news today, right? This is something that we are hearing about constantly. We have heard about these attacks over the last few months, and we will continue to hear about them. What has happened really is ransomware is not new, as we all know, right? But what has happened is the breadth and the sophistication of these attacks have increased significantly over the last few years. There are actually today networks where you can get these kind of toolkits to take them and attack businesses, and that's why this has become a very professional and sophisticated enterprise that are kind of causing all the businesses this pain of ransomware. So what can we do, right? We can actually implement strategies in terms of preventing these attacks. The traditional security model of perimeter security, network security, application security is a must. This definitely needs to be in place so we can prevent most of these attacks. But the ransomware today is not a when situation. It's not an if situation, but a when situation. So we know that ransomware will actually impact our businesses. So we need to have a last line of defense with data, and what we talk about the data security. So today we are going to go more into details of that, how to think through the data security and what we should be doing to make sure that our businesses are protected against such attacks. So first of all, when we think of data security, let's we have to also keep in mind that the data is actually spread across various sources today, right? It is in your data center, but it is also you're using public cloud, and then you have SaaS application where the data is there. So we really need to understand who has access to this data and what kind of access they have. So we have need to have a very comprehensive plan and understanding of our data so we can secure it. So that's really the first step in peeling this onion and starting to really think through the data security. The other aspect is when we think of data security, a lot of time we are thinking of backups and data protection to that. But in the cyber world, really the backups are not equal to cyber recovery. And why is that? So first of all, when an attack happens, it's not just a problem of IT or backup administrators to actually recover from them, right? It's a problem of everyone in the organization. Your security teams are involved, your compliance teams are involved, and really thinking through and investigating the attack from its from the very beginning and for to the very end. So in this case, what we really need to think about is not same as recovering from a disaster or recovering when you delete files. Really need to think through what we need to recover and where's the clean copy of the data present. So that is where we really need to think about the cyber recovery. As part of cyber recovery, it's really important that we are not really recovering the dirty copies and reintroducing the malware or the attack when we recover from them. So very important aspect. Also, we really need to understand how is this attack impacting our business, where the sensitive data is, and what can we do about that. So all of these aspects make the cyber recovery really very different from a regular recovery, and we really need to make sure we have all the tools in place to address this challenge. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time in talking about how a cyber attack looks like, what are the various, how attackers are really penetrating to the defenses today, and what is the situation. So really today, if you see, we talk about the social engineering, where attackers are really doing this social engineering to compromise the credential of individuals. Once they compromise the credential, they are deploying malware and really over a period of time deepen the access and expanding the footprint in an environment. So we talk about the dwell time. Dwell time is really where the attacker is sitting in your environment and going through the various layer of defenses that you have and increasing their footprint across your data. And what that leads to, that they are able to exfiltrate data. They are able to look at where the sensitive data is, exfiltrate that, and encrypt the data. Once the encryption happens, typically you receive a ransom demand, and then you detect that there is an attack. So this attack detection is happening at the very end, and by this time the attacker has already encrypted your data and exfiltrated the data. So what can we do? We can actually do much more to prevent this situation. So first of all, we should be able to actually see when the attack happened, when the data encryption take place. So what happens when a data is encrypted? There's a change in entropy of the data, and if we can detect that particular change has happened and we detect at that point in time, we can take this action much in advance. Similarly, if we can really go back and see, okay, when the threat is happening, how can we even prevent from the bad actors from exfiltrating data? We really need to see when they are actually increasing their access through the footprint of the data that we have. So if the attack is detected at when the attacker is elevating the permission and going through all the layer of defenses we have, we can actually really take action much in advance proactively and prevent business disruption or even a ransomware threat, ransom demand from our environment. So I'm going to ask Alex to maybe share some of the example or some scenarios or stories that he has seen in real world out there, and how the companies have dealt with the ransomware attacks in his experience.
Yeah, so actually, there's a question from the audience. Tim asked, how successful is any tool in preventing the social engineering aspect of phishing or ransomware? And I think it's directly relevant to this conversation. Unfortunately, the answer is It doesn't matter if it's 99.999% successful. The bad guys are using automation to fight asymmetrical cyber warfare with us. They can use bots and scripts to basically attack anybody and everybody all the time, and they only have to be right once. We have to be right every time. And so what we see is that ultimately, even if your entire staff is well trained, the likelihood is that at some point, some of their credentials will be phished. Now, the question is, what can you do to reduce the impact of that breach in your environment? And as Ankit is discussing here, one of the things you can do is, number one, try to catch it as early as you can. We know some of the behaviors that once credentials are phished, what are some of the behaviors they're going to do? Well, penetrating north-south is just step one. Going east-west after that is step two. They're going to want to have elevated permissions to get into as much as they can. They want to see what data is unencrypted. And if it's unencrypted, can they exfiltrate it to potentially hold it as a second extortion demand? Even if the ransomware attack fails, maybe extorting the possibility of exposing data on the dark web or publicly could cause a victim to want to pay up. And so the whole idea is to get to that point where you uncover the nature of the attack sooner rather than later, so that in that off chance that they get lucky and get through your frontline defenses, you're ready to minimize that impact to your enterprise as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Thanks, Alex, for that. And actually, that leads to this whole conversation around the ability to have a full cyber resilience. So, what does cyber resilience really means? The cyber resilience means that you have a well-defined cyber posture where you have full visibility in your data, on your data, and you can actually see who's accessing this data, who have what permission to access the data, and and if there is any anomaly in the access pattern. So we talk about this elevating permissions, and then that is where we really start to see whether an attacker that is dwelling on your data, they can increase their footprint and really threaten your business, right? So having that cyber posture to be able to have that good sense and good actually insights around all of your data across all of your workloads and deployments and your infrastructure, that's very critical, right? So that's the first step. And the second step is we talk about, this is not a if situation, this is a when situation, that this is something that you will see. So then if you have to actually recover, we need to have the whole cyber recovery story. And that's where we were talking about how cyber recovery is so very different from a regular recovery. Having a really good insights around what to recover, how not to reintroduce a threat, how to have a clean copy of your files, of your infrastructure, your apps, is really critical. So this is what you need to be really prevent any disruption and even prevent any sort of ransom demand or double extortion demands, and be really safe from such attacks. So I'm going to talk about Rubrik Security Cloud, which is the offering that Rubrik has. But before I go there, I'll also again invite Alex to talk about some of the key top of mind questions that the customer have today, and what you see around that.
Yeah, I think the questions that are on here are all applicable. I think one of the biggest questions that I get most often is, we have XYZ plan in place. Isn't that good enough? As an example, they say we have backups in more than one location. Isn't that good enough? We have a plan, a disaster recovery runbook to be able to recover our data. Isn't that good enough? And what we see, our experience, is that in general, when the attack actually happens, the likelihood is there's going to be unexpected events that are part of that attack. Things like the inability to communicate because your email is down, as an example. That's one potential avenue that folks didn't expect, right? They thought, oh, we'll just contact everybody, we'll be fine, we'll get on a bridge, everything's going to be good. But if your entire means of contacting folks is down as part of the attack, then that really puts a wrench in the works. For me, the ultimate thing is, regardless of what your plan is, it reminds me of a quote from Mike Tyson, which is that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Ransomware is that punch. Any cyber attack is that punch. It's going to hit you right in the face. And the question is, right, do you have tools that not only can you see that they work in terms of looking around corners for sneaky different types of attacks, like, as an example, NTP poisoning? What is that? The ability to change the date on your servers to the year 2050 and everything expires? That's out of left field that you maybe didn't expect, but you want to have tools that are ready for that, and also that can be tested on a regular basis to make sure they're going to work. And we'll talk about how Rubrik can help with all of that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. So I'm going to talk about really the product that we have introduced last year. It's called Rubrik Security Cloud. And really, when we holistically started thinking about how ransomware is working, I mean, Rubrik has been helping customers for last more than 5 years now, in actually in real world scenarios, in real world situations when attackers are attacking their data. We really saw a lot of holes that are there today, and we thought about that and built this product that we call Rubik Security Cloud. Rubik Security Cloud provides, first of all, as we were talking, that you need to have full visibility of all the data across your business, right? Whether it's in data center, in public cloud, or even in kind of SaaS application. So we build this a single interface that can provide you that. It covers all of those platforms, and it allows the customers to not just do data protection. It allows them to actually perform threat analytics, security, and determine what the security posture is, and at the time of recovery implement cyber recovery. So just to go a little bit more into the details of this, how does this really work, right? So Rubrik Security Cloud, we first of all, the basis of this is data protection. So we provide the ability for our customers to protect their data across enterprise or data center, across their cloud deployments, SaaS deployments, and even unstructured data. So any data in your file sitting in a NAS share, we can protect that. And when we say protection, we are taking the backups and we are making sure that they are always immutable and you can recover from those. The second aspect is really going back and providing you the analytics. So the one form of analytics is threat analytics, and this is really about being able to see whether a threat is whether a bad actor has penetrated your defenses. So we call it threat monitoring. The way it works is we actually have established a security lab within Rubrik. We call it Rubrik Security Labs, and they are looking for any threat vectors that are causing major havoc across businesses. And we use those threat vectors to scan through all of your data and look for any signs of such attacks within your data. We also allow customers to perform threat hunt. So this is very interesting actual capability where you can always hunt for very specific threats, and you can run these threat hunts across all of your data. So if any, then you can actually see if anybody has penetrated your defenses and if they have corrupted some files or not. And on top of this, we have anomaly detection. So we are continuously looking for and monitoring for any change in entropy using machine learning techniques. And we alert customers through Rubrik Security Cloud. And also we provide sophisticated API integration into your SIEM tools and other tool sets. Then building on top of that, the security posture aspect is we are not just looking at the threats in your data. We are very mindful is because of social engineering. A lot of time in the bad actors are imposing as your your employees or insiders. So we are looking at if there is a change in the user access or elevation of the permission or things like those, and then we are also alerting the customers around that. So this is a very key aspect of security posture management. The other thing is where your sensitive data is, who has access to this sensitive data. Are bad actors getting any access to the sensitive data or are exfiltrating this data? So that's where we talk about the data security posture. The cyber recovery comes where if an attack actually take place, how do you recover without any business impact in a very short period of time and without paying extortion or ransom? So this is really how the Rubrik Security Cloud has been developed. This all works on the time series data, so we can have really good insights. We can mine good insights and provide to our customers. Moving forward, really, I think as I covered, the key aspect is to have visibility across all of your data and through a single platform. What Rubrik Security Cloud also does, it allows customers to create single policies. So you can actually have one consistent single policies that you can apply across all of your data. And you don't have to toggle between interface or tools to protect one set of infrastructure versus another set of infrastructure. So I think that also very key. You can really do that. And also at the time of recovery, you need to have one holistic view of everything. And that's where Rubrik really provide really good value to the customers. So what are the benefits? Really, you have the guaranteed ability to recover your data. The data we actually protect is all immutable, and we provide the workflows and the tools required for cyber recovery. It's a single platform to protect all of your data across on-prem, cloud, and SaaS. You can test resilience. So this is also a very key part. So you have to continuously test your plans, so you know that they will work in this wartime situation, right? We talk about how Tyson talks about, like, everybody has plan, but having a plan is also a key aspect of being able to ultimately recover and protect your business. So these are some of the benefits that the customer get. And what I'm going to do is pass on to Alex to actually show the product to you and actually show how it works in real world.
Yeah, I'll go right into the lab here in a second. One thing real quick, there's a couple more questions I just want to address. And so Richard Brown mentioned that ultimately we do have to have fully end-to-end encrypted data, and I couldn't agree more. That's something that Rubrik takes really seriously. And so not only are we encrypting when we ingest, so that's data in transit as we're ingesting it, we also encrypt data at rest. And so we want to make sure that as that data is striping across our environment or being archived off or being just stored in our hardware, that anything and everything is always encrypted. That's a key part of it. Additionally, we don't have the decryption keys. Only you would have the decryption keys as the admin. And so from all of those perspectives, our focus is absolutely on data security. We use zero trust in our marketing, and I know for you technical folks out there, you're probably rolling your eyes at zero trust, but I promise you that this is something that we take very seriously, not just with our product in terms of how we build it, but also how we practice our own IT internally. And so you should see the hoops I have to jump through to get this lab I'm about to show you ready for it to be able to demonstrate. But let me go ahead and start sharing my screen and we can dig in. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
We're good?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Awesome. So over here on the right-hand side, we have some really cool security tools, and these are relatively new. I can't wait to show this to you. But first, we should take a quick overview on how it is that we protect your data. It's worth noting that for anybody that's an existing Rubrik customer, this is likely review. For those of you that are brand new to Rubrik, welcome to easy mode when it comes to data security. We're going to go through it. So if we click into data protection, this is what you're going to see right off the bat in terms of an environment. If we wanted to add into this environment, so like the very basics, right? We want to say, hey, I want to start adding in my vCenter, or I want to start adding in my databases, whatever it is. I could go into inventory, and it's going to actually allow me to add workloads, assuming that I didn't already have workloads added in. In this instance, this particular lab is populated with the gamut of everything we protect. I think there was another question about what SaaS platforms we protect right now. Our focus on SaaS is going to be on M365 at the moment, and we're working to expand that further. But Teams, Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, that kind of stuff on M365. But very simple to add in any workload into the environment. And then once we have it, you'll be able to see that workload in terms of what it is that we have access to based on credentials you've supplied. So it's very simple to, as an example, add a vCenter. All you would need is a fully qualified domain name or an IP address and some credentials that allow us to do the backup and recovery over API calls into that vCenter. If we wanted to then actually protect the environment, we would start clicking on some VMs, or we could go by folders, clusters and hosts. So if you want to just protect an entire cluster, or you could do tagging, that would also work in terms of being able to protect the environment. It's worth noting the reason you'd want to do this is just from an automation perspective. Your environment is likely dynamic. And so as it changes, you want to be able to pick up those changes. We want to make sure we're protecting everything. While these tags are loading, it's taking just a second to see. Here we go. They're loaded. You can see the number of VMs that would be associated with this. And so if I was to grab protection for just this right here, I could manage protection for that. If I click on that, you're going to see that I'm going to get the ability to assign an SLA domain, or I can hit this plus sign to create a new one. The other way I could do that is if I exit here, up here under SLA domains, I can actually view the SLA domains I already have, and of course, create a new one. So if I want to go ahead and create a new one, this is what it's what prompts up. It's worth noting, what is an SLA domain? You may have heard from other backup and recovery solutions a term like a policy or a job. From our perspective, SLA domains are similar but different in some very key ways, and we're going to go through that. So if I go to create it, there's basic behaviors that I'm inputting into any SLA I create. Number one, what do I want to back up? And so let's say in this instance, I want to back up vSphere VMs and let's say SQL databases. I hit next. And by the way, you could see everything that we have options for here. But let's say I just want to protect those two things with this particular SLA. Next up, how often do I want to take backups and how long do I want to keep them for? And so if I want to take a snapshot daily and then let's say a monthly, and I want to keep the daily for let's say 30 days, and I want to keep the monthly for let's say a year. This is just a basic example to give you through, get you through some of the ways in which you would configure this. You would hit next. And at this step, we then have the option to take, to further create an archive. Give me a second here as this lab loads. Gotta love live TV, no safety net here. But so as the SLA loads, what we're doing here is controlling behaviors. That's it. We're not actually selecting what we're going to protect. You saw that earlier in terms of how to select what you're going to protect. You would look at the inventory that's available to you based on the environment that you've presented to the Rubrik environment. And so, not sure why it's taking this long. Normally it doesn't. I'll tell you what, I do have a backup lab we can go to. So let me go over here to our data protection, our SLA domains. I'm going to go to create an SLA domain, Hyper-V SQL, and we're back where we were. So take a monthly and a daily, daily for 30, monthly for 12 months, hit next. And a similar hiccup here. Okay. Not sure why it's hicking up on archive. Oh, here it is. Okay, here's the archiving step. And so what the option here is, this is lifecycle management. And so again, the first place the data is going to hit is the Rubrik cluster. It's going to live there for a certain amount of time that you determine. Right now, the behavior that we have from step 2 is that the longest any piece of data would be protected by this SLA would be a year, 12 months. And so if we lower this down, you can see here that what we're doing here is saying that we're going to keep the data on the local Rubrik cluster for, let's say, 90 days. And I could always enter this in manually up top right here. I could just delete and recreate that. All this says is that I want to keep it on the Rubrik cluster for 90 days, even though the overall behavior is that I'm going to keep the data in for a total of a year, right? And so from there, you would just select the archival target that you're going to hit. We could hit Rubrik Cloud Vault as an example, and then it just gives you some additional options. We could hit next. Replication from Rubrik's point of view is very simple. It's just replicating data between 2 Rubrik clusters. The idea here is to have data highly available at all times. You want to be able to rapidly recover your data. Have data replicated between Rubrik clusters is going to ensure that not only is it safe and protected with all the security measures we've talked about, but that it's also quickly and easily recoverable. And then lastly, if we go into the SQL database information, you can see here that we're able to grab the transaction logs that we would need. If we wanted to do continuous data protection with VMware, we could also. These are some specifics. I hit next, and right there, you have some confirmation in terms of the SLA creation. From there, you could apply it. And like I said, this lab was not necessarily cooperating there for a second, but it's all right. We got through it. Let me go back to this lab. If we go back into our inventory, you're going to see that I have a bunch of objects already protected, including some VMs. And so if I go in here to vSphere VMs, I can manually look for a VM. And I'm going to do that at first just to show you that it exists. And I'm doing a trick. So as an example, if I select Palo Alto as my Rubrik cluster in terms of what it's protecting, I could then see all of the VMs that are in this environment as far as Rubrik is concerned. And we do have this particular VM, SH1 FS01. Just a VM, I click into it, and it's going to give me information about it as far as what Rubrik sees. You're going to see a calendar. Every green check means that we have some snapshot data available for that particular VM. You can also see events in terms of what's going on in terms of active jobs. You can also view from various points in time. And of course, we're able to run reports up here on the top. I'm not going to get into the reports because I do want to get into the security tools, but it's very easy to configure and set up reports. If we want to recover, we have a number of options to recover. And so if I click in on a given snapshot and I go to hit recover, I'm going to have options to live mount as an example, live mount being where Rubrik is presenting itself as a data store in the environment to then power up the VM. And so no blocks need to be written back to the location where the backup was taken from for the VM to be powered on and functional in the environment. This is awesome for both rapid recovery uses in terms of you need these VMs up as quickly as possible, but also for test dev. Why not use the Rubrik storage for test dev in terms of creating instances to work with as opposed to using the storage that's in your production environment? It also works for if we're dealing with like SQL databases, volumes, things like that. We're able to live mount any of those. So if I hit recover, you can see live mount is one of those options. In this instance, let's say I want to just recover an individual file. I'm going to hit next, and you can see that I can crawl the file system manually. And so I'm able to go all the way in and find a particular file. Let's say it's boot manager, boot MGR. Right there, I have options to recover it. And I have options to download it over at the original, send it somewhere else by exporting it, or I can recover it to a separate folder on the same system. These are just examples. There's a lot of different ways we can recover things depending on what it is we're recovering. But the reason I wanted to show you all this is because there is an easier way to manage this environment. And so if we go back to the data protection dashboard, and I use this handy dandy search function up here, I can actually just type in the server that I want. In this instance is SHFS01. You can see that that comes up, right, pretty quickly. I'm able to click into that server, and then once I'm in here, I can actually look for the individual file name. So boot MGR is the file that I'm looking for. You can see that if I search for boot MGR, it's going to give me options in terms of where it is. I can go ahead and select the version I want, and I can recover it very easily. So two simple Google-like searches are going to give me everything I need in terms of being able to recover pieces of data from the environment. So you see that basic protection, basic data, backup and recovery operations are very simple when it comes to Rubrik. Now, going back to our global dashboard, the ingestion of the data from a data protection point of view, backup and recovery, for us is a ground state. That is step one in an overall data security posture that we think our customers need to be at in order to be ready for a cyber incident. The rest of it comes into play in terms of steps 2 and beyond. And so if we look at our data threat analytics, you'll notice that we do have some anomalous events. We're going to get into what that means here. If we go into the dashboard for data threat analytics, you see that this breaks out into a few different options. They're listed here in this graphic, but you can also see them across the top. Anomaly detection. Let's dig into this one a little bit first. And so anomaly detection, very straightforward. Actually, this is the view from the actual file view, but let's go into dashboard. So what we're seeing here is that we have some anomalous files. And in fact, if you remember, we were looking for a specific server. We can search for that specific server and actually see what anomalous attacks are happening on that specific server, if that's something that we want to dig into. When we go in, you're actually going to get a view as to what the nature of it is from the perspective of recent suspicious files, the event timeline of what's going on. All of that gets broken down in terms of the summary. And then if we want to browse it more specifically, we can. And so you can see that already we're breaking this down to a volume level. If we go further in, we can go into folders, and we can go all the way down into individual files that are impacted in terms of the anomaly detection. Now, what is it that we're looking for? We're not looking for .lockbit, as you see right here. Why are we not looking for .lockbit? The bad guys change all the time. They are constant. They're what we would call polymorphous, in that the way they attack is constantly changing. And so if we were looking for just .lockbit, that's a trying to chase a moving goalpost that we're never going to catch up to. Instead, we need to look for patterns and behaviors. Otherwise, we either won't catch an anomalous event that we want to catch, or we might catch a whole bunch of false positives. And so what we don't want also, like I said, in terms of false positives, is the situation where you get alert fatigue. Alert fatigue meaning you get hundreds of these alerts every day. You're going to create a rule. It goes into a folder. You never open that folder again. That's a big challenge. And so instead, what we want to do is make sure that you only get a few of these where appropriate in any given time frame. I'll give you one example personally that I have a customer that recently implemented us. They've been a customer now for just coming up on a year. They implemented us in October, November of last year. And they started using this solution in terms of the anomaly detection. And so I asked them, we have quarterly check-ins just to see how it's going with Rubrik. And I asked them, how's it going with the anomalous detection? Are you getting a lot of false positives? And they said, no, so far, thankfully, everything, knock on wood, everything has been a false positive, but they're only getting about 2 a week. That's a very manageable amount of alerts in exchange for hopefully catching this when it happens. Now, how do we do that? It's very simple. We focus in on a number of behaviors. In this example, it's two or three things that are happening at the same time. Number one, a version of a file got deleted, and then a version of a very similar file got added back in. You see that added activity. And importantly, it had a different extension. Not that it's .lockbit, just that it's different. That amount of entropy at a file level is what we're looking for here when it comes to the anomalous detection. And this is what's going to both catch the bad guys when they're doing bad things, even if they change the name of their extensions, but also, of course, prevent that alert fatigue by preventing you from getting swamped. This is a passive thing that can happen once it's enabled. If you want, though, we can get more specific and into the threat hunting. This is something that Ankit talked about in the slides. When you're looking at threat hunting, this is a capability that is crucial, and that is the ability to interrogate the data and find specific indicators of compromise. Why is this crucial? Number one, hopefully in peacetime, you can identify these as they're dwelling. Ankit talked about that dwell time that happens in that one slide that showed you the timeline. If you can catch these while they're still in dwell mode, hopefully we can extricate them before they launch the attack and before it becomes a big problem. But even during wartime, let's say the attack's already hit, you want to be able to find indicators of compromise so that you can extract those. And when you go to recover, not only you're recovering clean data that doesn't have the anomalies, but also you're not reintroducing the vectors of attack. As an example, patch versions perhaps that were out of date. You're not reintroducing the files themselves that perhaps led to the encryption in the first place. If we go to start a threat hunt, it's incredibly simple. You may be familiar with file hashes and file patterns. YARA rules, if you're not familiar, YARA just stands for yet another recursive acronym, a little bit of an inside joke in IT. But what it is it represents pre-baked definitions to look for in terms of IOCs. They're put out by some private organizations like security companies, and they're also put out by public organizations like here in the US, CISA. As an example, you can sign up for alerts from CISA to get YARA rules. I happen to sell to a lot of public sector customers, and all of them are signed up for those CISA alerts. The main thing there is oftentimes they probably had a good methodology for looking for indicators of compromise in endpoints. Endpoints is relatively simple. They're smaller, so it's easier to go through the data there. Network settings, firewall settings, again, these are small things. But the challenge is doing it on production servers. Being able to see, hey, here's my definition, and here is what I'm looking for, and then cracking open every file on a server to see if there's a match, that creates a huge challenge on a production server, because you can imagine what that's going to do to CPU, to RAM, to your network as communications are going back and forth. Luckily, Rubrik is going to be able to run these hunts against backups. So the snapshots that Rubrik already has on file, that's what we can run these YARA rules against. And if you can copy and paste, you can create a threat hunt in Rubrik. It is that simple. Here's an example YARA rule, but you could have gotten it from your email. You could have gotten it from GitHub. You could have gotten it from going to a specific government website or security website. Any of these places are fine. You would copy, paste in the YARA rule, hit next, and it's as simple as figuring out where do you want to run the YARA rule. And so as an example, we want to select the Rubrik cluster that's appropriate. Let's say it's Palo Alto, because we want to get that SHFS1, that pesky server again. We can hit next, and you can see that we can break it up. These are all of the different object types that we're able to run YARA rule or threat hunts in general against. So if I click on vSphere VMs, you can see that I get a breakdown of the different vSphere VMs. And if I want to, I can search for, I could search for SH FS01. It's going to be in here. There it is. And so as an example, I could run the threat hunt just against that server, or I could pick a bunch of servers. I hit next, and I have an option now. Do I want to see the most recent one, or do I want to select the custom time range? What's important here is that even if you were able to run threat hunts against your production data, you'd only be getting current state. It's just, that's what's available to you, right? With Rubrik, because we go back 30, 90, whatever, however many days you have on the Rubrik cluster, that now becomes your potential window to hunt for threats in the environment. And so if you wanted to have a time scan that goes back 30 days, or let's say it goes back between 30 and 60 days, because you know it's not within 30 days that it happened, you can have a very custom time range. You can see here in terms of setting that, it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to go ahead and keep the most recent. I'll just name this test so we can go through it real quick. At a high level, you're able to select some filter files just to make it quicker and easier to run the threat hunt. I can hit next, and here is just confirmation if I wanted to create the threat hunt. I'm going to hit exit. You can see that we already have some in here. And so if I click on this lockbit threat hunt, you could see that I have some servers that got hit. Do have some options in terms of starting cyber recovery, or I can look at the parameters of the threat hunt to see what it is, what servers we ran it against, and then what was the YARA rule that we ran to find this bit of lockbit in this lab. I'm going to go back to the cyber recovery in a second, but I did want to talk then about threat monitoring. So what does threat monitoring represent? Well, the idea behind threat hunts is that you want to be proactive and take on looking for the indicators of compromise in your environment. I think that's great. But you lose some of that advantage that you had with anomaly detection, where it's passively doing it and alerting you in the environment. So what are we able to do with threat monitoring? Well, we're able to kind of combine the best elements of both. And so we're going to be able to automate, if you enable threat monitoring, I should say, in your environment, we're going to be able to passively scan by default the data as it comes in and changes. We're going to be able to scan so far back in your environment based on your rules that our team has cultivated. And so Ankit mentioned our Zero Labs team earlier. They're a team of security professionals that have decades of experience in the field. Leveraging them as well as our security partners in the field, so various security providers and to a certain extent the government and what they're able to provide, we're able to cultivate our rules that are most relevant to the current state, the current meta, if you will, of the cyber world, and we can apply that automatically. And so you can see here that we're able to, in this environment, based on this threat monitoring that is automatic, requires no configuration other than to enable in your environment. You can see that we've actually captured something here. It tells you information about where it was captured, and it specifically says, hey, there could be older snapshots that contain the file. We recommend performing a threat hunt, which again is an active process. And so if I want, I can go ahead and copy to clipboard this MD5. I could start a threat hunt with that copied text into the environment and then run the threat hunt against any servers that I need to. So pretty important there in terms of how we're going through our threat assessment, is that this is ultimately, it's a combination of things. It's not any one, there's no one silver bullet to be able to find and mitigate threats, but certainly we want to be able to find them, quarantine them, and when we recover, make sure that we're only recovering from clean data. Do you want to take a sec? Any relevant questions to this section? If not, I'll continue on. Ankit or Scott?
Yep, no, keep going.
We got it. Let's go. Let's get into our data security posture. And actually, I do want to go into that other lab for that section. There we go. So if we go back into our data security posture, what this represents is the ability to understand what's going on with the actual data in terms of who has access to it and and not only who has access to it, but who has access to it. And so it starts off with sensitive data discovery. So if I click in here, you can see here that we have our sensitive data in terms of what's been used, but this will give you specifics in terms of where the sensitive data is. But before we do that, let's actually take a look at how we can create a policy real quick to determine what is sensitive data. And so you can see that we have some out-of-the-box definitions and some policies already pre-built. These are some, like as an example, HIPAA, PII, US financials. These are default to any rubric environment, but you can create your own. And basically, to create a policy, you would start adding in various analyzers that you want to be part of that policy. So I'm going to hit exit. So then let's take a look at the analyzers. The analyzers represent the individual components that make up overall what it is you're searching for in terms of what is sensitive data. If we go to add an analyzer, you can see that we have some options here. It's as simple as adding in a regular expression or a dictionary. So you have options in terms of how to do this. You may have some pre-baked from other applications. You can just go ahead and copy and paste those in, and we can go ahead and work with them. I'll hit exit, and then we go back to sensitive data. We can actually see, and then I'm actually going to search for our friend SH1 again. Actually, no, this is a different environment. I forgot. Yeah, because I do have that in the other one. But if you see here, you can see in file shares, we can go all the way down and start looking at the sensitive data. Not only do we see where the sensitive data is, and you can see also what the classification is. So you see on the right-hand side that the reason that we've marked this as sensitive data is because this hits against both US PII, personally identifiable information, as well as US financials. But it's not only that we can see that files have that information, and by the way, of course, we can export this as needed to be able and report on this in any which way you need to. but also we can see the permissions. We can take a look at who has access to this. And it looks like this particular lab doesn't want to give me the permissions, so I'll just go over here, back to sensitive data, data security posture. There it is. So if I click in, you can see some information there, and I go into permissions, it shows me everybody that has access. The reason this is important is when it comes to sensitive data in a cyber event, you want to look at two things. Number one is the data where it's supposed to be. Is it in a folder that it's meant to be, right? And if it's not, let's go about remediating that. Number two, is the data does that folder have the right permissions? You don't want all users to have access to a folder that's meant to have sensitive data. And so that's something that you want to rectify as well. Now it goes further. We are able to take this user access information in terms of who has access to information to actually start to investigate what are individual users opening. So if you look at the permissions, we're able to see last access in terms of files. And so we can see when users are accessing files that they shouldn't be accessing. This analysis, this user access analysis, is something that's brand new with Rubrik, just came out recently. It's added into the Rubrik Security Cloud. But it does allow us to see when behavior might be risky in terms of who's accessing what data. Why is that risky? Well, number one, it could be an insider attack, possibly. That is absolutely something that happens. But perhaps a more likely scenario is that phishing that we talked about earlier. If I'm a bad guy and I've phished your credentials, I want to start accessing files to see what it is I can touch, what sensitive information I can get that I can hold over you to try to extort money from you. And so it's very important to be able to have this kind of early warning. And this goes back to that slide Ankit was talking about where he showed being able to determine where the elevated access is, where folks are starting to target data to try to get at this before it becomes a bigger problem. The last bit would just be the orchestrated application recovery in terms of cyber recovery. So if we go in here, if I go back to the global dashboard and I go to orchestrated recovery, I have options to create blueprints that allow me to do different things. And for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to show you specifically the idea behind a cyber recovery capability. And so if I go back into my threat hunts, I'm going to be able to click in on the threat hunt, find the data that has indicated as a compromise, and then execute an automated recovery plan that can do a couple of different things. Number one, I can go ahead and recover only the clean data, not reintroducing the indicators of compromise, not reintroducing the anomalies that we detected from the other capabilities that we have. So if I hit start, you can see here that non-quarantine, non-anomalous data, this is an option I have to recover these servers. But additionally, I do have other options. If I wanted to recover anomalous or quarantine data to a sandbox, to an isolated recovery environment, so that law enforcement is able to dissect what happened in this cyber attack and be able to analyze all of that, I can do that. I can recover this to an area that has a different network configuration that is designed to receive this, while at the same time, in parallel, kick off a job to recover only my clean data, ensuring that I narrow my recovery time. And ultimately, that's the name of the game. I think going back to that initial question we had regarding how can we stop social engineering and phishing attacks, the answer is we can do our best, and we do, right? We have phishing exercises to try to teach folks good behavior, and hopefully it's working. But ultimately, they're going to get through. At some point, the bad guys will get lucky that one time that they need to, and they're going to access your information. Now, if they're able to do that, we want to be able to recover that data as quickly as possible. And that's exactly what the combination of tools that Rubrik has to offer is able to do. Ankit, if you're able to bring up that last slide, I want to just talk a little bit about that. All right, I think
Sure.
I can click on it.
Is it something? I think you have to stop sharing.
I did, I thought, or let's see. There it is.
Okay.
Can everybody see the warranty slide there? Scott?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. We see.
So this is what we're getting at, right? Is that ultimately when you take in that default zero trust architecture that we've talked about this entire hour, when you take into account the Rubrik Zero Labs, cybersecurity professionals working inside of Rubrik to ensure that we're on top of the latest information that is possible to make sure that the tools are working, and things like our ransomware response team. We haven't talked about that yet, but it's a service that's included. This is not a professional services engagement. This is not extra money that you have to pay a premium for. Our ransomware response team is made up of folks in our support organization. It's a virtual team that is staffed with experience. They see 250, 300 attacks a year. We have a little over 5,000 customers. So of those that are reported to us, they see about that many attacks a year. To date, I'm going to knock on wood again, they've been able to help recover the Rubrik data 100% of the time. So the Rubrik protected data, they've been able to help recover each and every time. But these are folks that this is what they do. Every day they come in, and every week they're working a few of these cases to make sure that our customers are able to recover. But when you take this in its totality, and we're able to offer a warranty regarding ransomware recovery, but what that warranty really means, the real thing that is backing that up, is the fact that we can take what is on average, according to Gartner, a 21-day cycle to recover. And that 21 days does not include the aftershock impacts that happen. 21 days to just get back to a semblance of normal on average, according to Gartner. We could take that and shorten that down to 7 days, down to 5 days. We have examples on our site where we helped a college recover in a couple of hours from a ransomware attack, and they were able to be confident that they had clean data when they got stood back up. Now, to be fair, that's a smaller environment. I get it. But the fact is that we have the technology capabilities to be able to deliver that with confidence, and we are able to stand behind it in terms of our warranty. I'll go ahead and wrap up there. I think there may be some additional questions. Ankit, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on top of that.
No, absolutely. I think really the key message here is that attacks are inevitable, and they are happening every day, right? Businesses are under attack. Our business is under attack. Everybody's business is under attack. We really need to have this multi-layer approach where we are securing our infrastructure, where we are really looking at all the data that we have and putting in tools in place so we can protect this data from bad actors. And I think that's where we talk about some of the capabilities that Rubrik has developed that you can actually deploy in your environment to make sure that you are safe and your businesses are safe. And that's also backed by the guarantee or the warranty that Rubrik stands behind, right? So I think that's what we wanted to share. I would like to open this up for any Q&A, live Q&A that the audience may have. And Scott, do you see anything that we can answer here?
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. Alex grabbed some there throughout, which was great. I have some questions, and I'll start out with one of mine. So SLAs are a common concept, across the industry, but you guys have a lot of IP and experience, with your specific implementation. I'm just wondering if there are, best practices that you've come across as far as, setting up and using those Rubrik SLA domains that you could share with people.
Yeah, I think the SLAs are very simple to configure. The thing I would say is the best practice would be to make sure that everything is protected. I didn't cover this in the demonstration, but the way Rubrik works is it's based on hierarchy in terms of the SLAs. And so you're able to set, let's say you wanted a rudimentary protection for everything in your environment, meaning I take a once a week backup and I hold it for 30 days. That's just an example that I'm giving, but it could be whatever. Basic level protection for everything in the environment. You could set that at the entire, vCenter layer as an example. And this way, any server in the environment that gets added in is automatically going to get picked up by that. Then you could say these other servers are more important or have data that's more critical. They need more refined protection. You could apply an SLA more specifically, and the most granular SLA is going to take precedence. And so what I would argue is that likely you're going to want to have some sort of stopgap minimum for all of your data, because the last thing you want is to regret that you never backed up that one server that got added in 6 months ago. Right. And so from a best practices from an SLA application is have a bare minimum for everything. And then as you go through and identify more critical workloads, feel free to assign a more granular SLA to those more critical workloads.
Yeah, that's really smart.
If I may add, I think, and Alex kind of covered in the demonstration of the tool as well, right? We really need to holistically think about the protection. You want to have how many copies of this data you want to keep to absolutely make sure that you are operationally doing the right thing and as well as protecting your business, right? So really being able to archive and also replicate the data, also key aspects, and being able to do it in the single flow is really the value that you get. So I think thinking holistically across your SLAs and applying them is really the key best practice I would recommend the audience.
Okay. All right. Super. Hey, we do have an audience question here. We hear a lot about immutability, and they're wondering, in what ways are modern immutable backups different from other backups?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So first of all, most backups are generally speaking going to be relatively vulnerable, and there's a reason for that. Traditional architecture means that you're consuming storage that's part of production, storage that's accessible over the network. Rubrik, one of the things we didn't cover here in this demonstration today was we logically air gap our data, and all that means is that the only way to interact with the Rubrik, cluster that's protecting your data is through APIs. Those APIs have very limited operations in terms of what they're capable of doing. And so from that perspective, it's very difficult to access it. On top of that, it's an append-only file system, meaning that even if you could get somehow, and again, this would be extremely difficult, I will never say anything is impossible because everything, you'll never know, right? And I don't want to be that guy. But it's very difficult to get access, let's say that. Even if you could, there is no command in the file system itself to directly delete or overwrite data. It doesn't exist. And so it's an append-only file system, meaning all you can do is add to data. The only way data comes off is if it naturally expires. We prevent against malicious expiration in a number of ways. One of them is the ability to set retention lock, which is to say that if you wanted to be able to delete data prematurely as an admin, let's say you wanted to clean up some space, you'd have to contact support. What's going to happen is support's going to, if I'm your, let's say I'm your sales engineer, support's going to reach out to me on Slack and they're going to say, hey, is your customer actually trying to do this? I'm going to have to call you on the cell phone. We're going to have to agree that you're trying to do this. The analogy I give is like two folks on a nuclear submarine turning the keys at the same time to be able to launch the missiles. That's the kind of security that we're talking about in terms of premature deletion of data. Additionally, beyond that, we do things like NTP protection. Like, so I talked about it earlier, network time protocol. It's a way to access systems and just set the time to a different year. And so as an example, if you have all of your backups set to expire within a year or 5 years, and a bad guy sets the time to 2050, all of your backups expire, not just the ones that are local, but if you've written backups to tape or the cloud, it's going to trigger expiration of all of that. And that can be a huge problem. And so we make sure to do things like have a monotonic clock that's separate and doesn't trust your NTP server. And so if the monotonic clock hasn't said that the right amount of time has passed, we're not going to honor the expiration of that data. And so there's so many numbers of ways that we come at this problem that it's almost difficult to get into it all. But ultimately, our legacy architecture, the backups are hanging out on the network. Likely they're unencrypted, so they're able to be read right away. And even if they're not, even if they are encrypted, they're likely able to be directly deleted, directly overwritten, or attacked in any number of other ways, like we've already talked about.
Just to add, I think the security is a multi-layer approach, right? And I think Alex covered a bunch of ways that we are protecting as an immutable data. We also have the last fail-safe here, which we call intelligent data lock, right? Even if somehow the bad actor is able to expire, we keep this copy of the data always for, I think, 7 days is the intelligent data lock. So it is always even available there as well. So again, having this multi-layer approach of making sure that your data is immutable and cannot be deleted or expired by the bad actor is again a key for making sure that you can always recover and ensure business continuity.
Super. Well, it looks like we're running out of time, but Ankit, if somebody wants to get started with Rubrik or find out more, what do you recommend they do?
I would just say, reach out to us. We are always here, and we can really share how Rubrik can help you really ensure that you are protected in this, in this day and age of cyber attacks and ransomware attacks, which is really, really key for us to ensure continuity of our businesses.
I think in the handouts, some of the content that's there, I would definitely follow up on that. Rubrik.com is another great place. There is a contact us there from there. If you have to, my email address is pretty straightforward. It's just alex.restrepo@rubrik.com. Feel free to reach out. I'll route you to the right folks that can help you out further.
All right, excellent. Well, Ankit, great presentation, and Alex, really comprehensive eye-opening demo there. Really appreciate this time and all your insights and the questions throughout. Thanks a lot for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
All right, and we do have one more piece of business before we wrap up. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is Adam Hobbs from Virginia. So congratulations to Adam Hobbs. We'll be in touch about getting you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.